everybody, to our anime podcast episodes. My name is Mamir.
And I'm still Lennox.
And this is going to be, I think, our third episode now of this, I think. Something like that.
Yep, this is the third one.
So, right before we ended last one, we were going to talk about waifus. And I know that's so stupid to kind of say, but before we do that, I kind of want to bring up Re:Zero, Starting Life in Another World. It's one of the newest ones I've started watching, and I mean it's not new, but it's new to me. God, that one also is so good. Do you know the premise of that one?
Oh yeah, I know it. It's a very good isekai. It's another story that like you take someone from our world and then they end up in a different world, and then there's the sort of culture and expectations clash. Like someone from our world ending up in a fantasy environment,
Yeah,
and then trying to make their way through it.
Okay, yeah. So the big thing about this show though is he has what he calls his special ability, where anytime he dies, he gets reset to a quote unquote save point. So anytime something bad happens to him and he ends up dying or whatever, he jumps back to a previous moment that he was already at, and then he tries to either fix the situation or do something a little bit different or whatever, and something else changes, and he's like, well, that didn't happen last time, what's going on? And then there's a different outcome or whatever. So this happens over and over, and some of it actually starts to get kind of traumatic for him, and it's very interesting how he navigates going through and making these different choices. And so far, I think I'm on, let's see, it looks like I'm on season 2, episode 31. And it's been pretty interesting so far, and I've been kind of hooked on that one right now. Which I think we can kind of tie into the topic of waifus, because the twins in that show, Rem and Ran, they are adorable. I love those two.
And I want to preface this because Mamir slammed me as soon as we stopped recording. I want to preface this next part of the conversation with it's largely a joke. The idea of waifus is basically it's like your celebrity crush.
Yeah.
You ask someone who their celebrity crush is, and they might say something like Angelina Jolie from Wanted or Halle Berry from Swordfish. And it's just you're listing off an attractive a character who is attractive or has attractive qualities, and you're sort of just oh yeah, they were amazing in that, or they were incredible in that, or yada yada. The idea with a lot of Japanese anime is that it's oh yes, this character in this serialized adventure is the waifu. That's the term that came to be associated with it, where it's mostly you see this character on a fairly regular level, and the character gets popular, and then maybe that character gets brought into a larger franchise. I think a good way to phrase it. It's that character grows in popularity until you start seeing them cross mediums. I think the big real start to a lot of the waifu conversations came from Evangelion, where you had Rei and Asuka, and the redhead chick and the blue haired chick, respectively. Or no, Rei's the blue haired chick. Asuka is the redhead one. Okay, just making sure I didn't get that wrong, so someone slammed me. But basically, those two characters became so popular based on the popularity of Evangelion that then their popularity grew, and then they started being a lot of cross promotional stuff and different things. I remember when I was in Japan, I still would look up, and sometimes I would see those characters advertised on something. And this is well past the point when those characters were first introduced to through Evangelion. And so it's just like it's a bit of a surreal moment where you're just looking and you're just like, oh wow, talk about something that has survived the test of time. Like it's really just something to contemplate. I remember someone handing me a box of tissues with Evangelion promotional art on it, and I was just like, yeah, that's the power of waifus and good anime, you know?
Yeah, that's kind of like how you see a lot of things of like Hatsune Miku. Like,
yes,
she's like everywhere. Like anytime I see like your quote unquote basic anime like merch or some type of promotion or something like that, or even like a lot of the time when I would walk around on like VR chat or whatever, like, you know, eventually you're gonna see somebody who's got like a very similar, if not exact, like Hatsune Miku, and she's got like different like designs like everywhere too, and I see her all over everything, like anything anime. That's usually where I end up seeing her.
For those of you who don't have maybe much of like a Japanese like cultural introduction, this is they're basically the popularity of like Marvel or DC characters.
Yeah,
Like
that's like seeing like Iron Man on everything, you know.
yeah, you see these characters. Like imagine Marvel back before like the franchise took a bit of a hit with its latest films.
Superman, Batman, you know,
Yeah.
they're like not even just Marvel, but like any like superhero stuff. Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
seeing them all over everything.
Like it's all over the place. Like there's no escaping it, and it reaches that point with some of these characters, and so that sparks conversations with fans of these animes, talking about it's like, oh, like who's the best girl of the show, like which character, like you get all these guys who will watch the show, and there'll be like several female characters. Guys will discuss which one appeals to them most, in sort of like a half joking tone. Like it's not serious. It's not like a real obsession.
Yeah.
At least for the more stable members of the community.
Right. I was gonna say at least we hope so for some people.
I mean, hey, it's the internet. You know, if you're on the internet, you know it's a weird place sometimes. But
Yeah.
For normal-ish people, it's a joking conversation, or you talk about like qualities you appreciate in this character. Yeah, so a lot of stuff that usually flows from those conversations is usually discussions of, all right, well, who's best girl? And from there, it's just like, oh yeah, she's best girl, she's my waifu, and you know that's the classic conversation that would pop up when people would talk about Evangelion, where it's like, all right, who's your waifu? Is it Asuka or is it Rei? And you know, then you grow up and men of culture realize, no, it's Masato.
Yeah, see, I don't know these characters. I mean, I know the faces of like some of the characters in that show, but again, that's another one I haven't seen. I haven't seen a lot of anime, but like that's another one that I kind of know like what it's like the baseline is, and I've seen the characters because, again, like you said, I mean, you can find a lot of these types of characters everywhere once they start getting popular. Like all the time I would see Rem and Ram like everywhere, all over things, and I was like, I don't fully understand like what this show is. Like I haven't watched any of it. Like I just see these two characters and I see that they're from like this show. So eventually I ended up picking it up. I think I picked it up like a couple weeks ago, and like I ended up getting what is it called? The Otaku box.
There you go. That's the one.
And I got one of the figures in the Otaku, however you say it, Otaku box.
I'm enjoying that you struggle with the word otaku.
Well, I was like looking at 6 different things. I had like another notification that popped up, and then the notification from like Discord and stuff.
Yeah, and I'm distracting you with images that I'm sending you of Evangelion right now.
Yeah, I was like, what was this? And then I had like a Steam like thing come up too, and I was like, what is happening? And I'm trying to speak, and so like I got one of the figures, and I was like, you know, oh, this is kind of cool. Like, you know, maybe I should actually start the show, because it was like a good quality figure. Like I've never collected like figures for things like that. I've had a couple other figures, like I got a Walking Dead figure, I got a Game of Thrones figure, I got a little Doctor Who like Funko Pop. So I never had like figures or whatever. And I see people all the time, a lot of these, like, I guess you would call them like otakus. I would see them all the time with like, all these like big figures in the background and little statues and everything. And then people would have like, I think we mentioned before, like the Gundams and everything. So when I kept seeing all these advertisements on like TikTok and everything for this box, I was like, oh, they got like little figures, like that would be kind of cool. So I ended up like trying it out and everything, and I got a couple figures, and I was like, you know what, like I think I'm gonna actually send them some actual like decent amount to get some of these boxes, because they got a lot of really cool like merch and everything. And the chick who does it, she's super nice. She gets a hold of you by email if you have any problems, like within like a day. And she's super friendly, super helpful. Like if there's any problems with the orders or anything like that, she's like on top of it. So good service that I recommend, that if anybody wanted to check out, if they like anime merch and stuff like that, like definitely check it out. Some of it can be a little pricey, especially if you want to add on like a bunch of stuff, so be prepared for that. But like the t-shirts and everything, they're great quality. And again, none of this is sponsored or anything like that, although that would be pretty cool. Maybe I can just send her an email, be like, hey, we'll talk about like your box. Just
send her the recording you already did about talking about her on our podcast.
Yeah, it's like, now you owe me. No. But she's got like she does like her own like comics and stuff. So almost like mangas. Like I think she's written, and I don't know if she's written and drawn like her own. I don't know if she has like an artist that does any of it or whatever, but like she, at least it's hers. It's her idea. Like the stories that she comes up with, I think are all hers. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure that's what it said in like one of the emails I got. And there's like a Discord that you can join and vote on like different stuff that comes in the boxes. But all of it is really cool, like anime merch. Things like, I got coasters in this last one of like some zombie one. I can't remember exactly which zombie anime this was.
There's a couple of them right now.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of this stuff like I don't know 100% about, but it's bringing to light like more animes that I probably have maybe heard of or maybe have never even thought of. So and these figures are pretty cool because, I mean, they're nerdy. They're like, definitely not something everybody would want to have, but you get a cool figure that might end up being like your favorite character in like a new anime that you want to watch.
Yeah, it's a nice little decorative piece to like, put around your computer or on a shelf in like your gaming room or something like that. Like I have a couple of figurines, mostly Warhammer miniatures, but I also have a couple of figurines around my room right now that I'm turning to look at them right now as I'm saying this. But yeah, like they're nice little decorative pieces. Like they're cool little things to have.
Yeah, and I was just trying to kind of tie that in with like the whole like waifu talk about it. Like I didn't know who Rem was, but like I had seen her all the time and stuff, and her twin sister Ram. So when I got like the figure, I was like, oh, she's kind of pretty, like a cute little like figurine of her. And I was like interested in the show to begin with. I just never really kind of rethought about it. It's funny because it's called ReZero, but so like that kind of like gave me that push to be like, okay, like let me start the show. Maybe I can get to know this character a little bit more now that I have like a little figure sitting on my desk of her.
And it's funny how like you mentioned that, and like a lot of times the popularity of these characters doubles back, because people have like these best girl conversations. It's like, who's best girl this season or whatever, and then sometimes the conversation will involve someone talking about a character that like you've never heard of.
Right.
Like if you never heard of like Dress Up Darling, and I mentioned Marin, you'd be like, I don't know who that is. And then I would like mention something, or I'd send you like a clip from the anime or whatever, and you'd be like, oh, that's cool, or that's interesting, and
I
that
think
would
that's
encourage
how
you to watch the anime.
Yeah, I think that's how you actually got me watching it. You were like, hey, like this is like a decent anime, like, you know, look at these characters, and you were kind of like describing the anime, and I was like, yeah, it seems kind of interesting, and like watching it and everything. I think you might have sent me a clip, or at least at the very least you told me about it and got me into it, and it turned out to be like a really good anime that I liked. And I think that's one of the other like really cool things about like starting new anime is finding that like community of people, and everyone will kind of like get together and talk about like big plot points of certain animes, like characters and everything, and it's just like any other TV show, and I think that's what a whole lot of people don't really understand. Like they just see it as like goofy cartoons.
Yeah.
And like they don't really get like the whole concept behind some of them. I mean, to be fair, a lot of them are like goofy cartoons.
Yeah, but it's like there's a cultural stigma that comes with it. It's like, I mean, even still today, there's like it's hard to talk about certain anime than it is other anime just because of like the perception of them. Like it's more widely accepted, but like it's not as mainstream. Like if I were to talk about like the deeper symbolism of say Avatar: The Last Airbender, that's less weird to people if I were to talk about the deeper symbolism of Evangelion, for like, because I was as an example, because I was just talking about it.
Yeah.
It's like it's one of those is more generally accepted by people invested in pop culture than it is another one. Like I've talked with coworkers, for example, who are very huge into The Last Airbender and are huge fans, and will talk all day long about characters, ideas, the setting, like how the world works in there and all, and that setting and all that, and they'll go way into it. But then if I flip the conversation, or if I try to flip it into like, oh, have you seen like, I don't know, Attack on Titan or whatever? It's like they'll just be like, no, I don't watch that kind of stuff. And I have a moment of just like, oh, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and it's like the heartfelt story of some of these shows, or the like we mentioned before, like the character development and everything of some of these characters in these shows. They will enjoy that type of stuff in like other media, but then as soon as you switch it over to anime, they're like, nah, not my thing. And it's like, but it's exactly the same. Even some of the stories could line up like similar with some of these shows that I've seen with like other like quote unquote real shows, like real life shows, you know, live action, I guess you could say. And it's like, yeah, you like it in this, but as soon as it's animated, you're like, eh. And it's like, well, that's not fair. Give it a shot, you know?
Yeah, like it. Like I am confident that a lot of this stuff would have more of an impact if it was like more talked about. That's why, like, you know, I think that's why I think eventually anime did become more mainstream, is that people had those conversations. They would talk more deeply about, you know, the show that they were watching, and then, you know, more interest would pick up from there, and people were like, oh, maybe this has something to it. Like I don't know, like people would talk like something that's more like, that's not as niche to talk about, like Cowboy Bebop, for example. It's about bounty hunters. It's about this cool guy with karate skills. He's hunting bounties, and there's all these like these gunslinger fights and a shootout in a casino, and scam artists and stuff like that, and it's intermixed with cool scenes of like spaceships and stuff like that. And people talk about like the deeper themes of like, it's like, oh yeah, it's like a Western, like, you know, it's like we're on the run from the law, we've done some bad stuff, and now we're trying to escape the long arm of the law, or stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it brings people into it because they're more familiar themes that are more generally accepted than others. Like yeah, like for example, and this is delving into like another anime. I'm changing tracks slightly here, but an anime that I thought always had some very deep themes that I didn't realize until much later on in my life was Digimon, which, for those of you who don't know, is like a Pokemon. I hate referring to this, but it's like the best way to describe it. It's like a knockoff Pokemon. It's like mom. It's like, mom, can we get Pokemon? No, we have Pokemon at home. You get home and it's Digimon.
Yeah.
It's one of those situations. You get kids in another world, and there's like these cute monsters, and they have like these special abilities, and the monsters fight. You're watching big kaiju battles a lot of the time, or you're watching beasts fight each other, and kids going on adventures in different settings and stuff like that. And it's very interesting, and as a kid, I was entertained by it because it was on more frequently during its watch schedule, because I think Pokemon was only on Saturdays and Digimon made it onto the afternoon broadcast for a while. So it was easier to watch Digimon than it was to watch Pokemon. And so I got more involved in Digimon for a little bit.
Yeah, I never really watched Digimon too much. Like some of the stuff I really watched would have been like Yu-Gi-Oh! And like Pokemon, even though I wasn't really allowed to watch Pokemon like when I was really young, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But yeah, so like Digimon wasn't one of the ones that I really watched.
The big thing that I wanted to mention with it is that like it initially it comes off as just like this adventure story about, you know, the kids and their Digimon partners like fighting monsters and stuff like that, and all this crazy stuff happening. But as you reach like the second season and there's like a power up thing that happens, they're like, oh, you gotta all inherit like these tags and crests which represent like a certain quality or emotion, and you all need to learn how to embody these because like they're meant to be yours, but you need to learn how to embrace this aspect of yourself. And it's like they go on this little journey of self-discovery within the context of the show. And as a kid, it's like that, like a lot of that sort of like blew my mind, and I was like, whoa, you unlock powers by being more emotionally mature and aware? Like, that's wild. And as an adult, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. But as a kid, like, the idea was just mind-blowing to me. And I also realized over time that a lot of those kids are really messed up. Like, it's not like Pokemon where it's just like, you know, Ash is generic, Misty's kind of generic, and you'll maybe get like one or two episodes ever that talk about their backstory. But otherwise, like, they themselves don't go much into it. These kids, though, it's like some of their like background stuff is like kind of messed up, and it's like, yeah, no wonder you have like some deep-seated trauma and you have to work to overcome it to become the better version of yourself. Like, there are these two brothers in the show. There's Matt and TK. Those are not their Japanese pronounced names, but for the English dub, they definitely changed them up. But like, they're both like they're brothers, and their parents got divorced. I think they still live in Tokyo, like in the same city. Their parents got divorced. They moved. They're separated. They each took one kid. The dad got Matt, the older brother, and the mom got TK, the younger one. And we sort of get the idea later. It's like, oh, Matt doesn't know how to be a big brother and is really distraught by that because he doesn't spend any time anymore with his little brother. And them going to like the summer camp where they all ended up going to the Digimon world together was like his big exposure to his younger brother again after like probably a really messy divorce. Or there's like this implication with like one of the girl characters where it's just her and her mom, but she resents her mom because she thinks that like the reason her mom and dad aren't together anymore is that her mom drove him away, and so she blames her mom and has like this deep-seated resentment for it. It doesn't really spell it out, but it's like you sort of pick up these context clues. Or like Izzy, the boy genius, who you're like, oh yeah, boy genius, you know, I'm sure he's a wacky, goofy character and makes up sciencey words sometimes. And then you find out that when he was like 4, he was eavesdropping at his parents' door in the living room and found out that he was adopted and has just been holding on to that for years. And you're just like, oh wow, these kids got trauma.
Yeah, I did not know that there was, you know, so much like backstory stuff to Digimon.
Well, a lot of it is like what you think. It's like Pokemon Adventures. It's like, hey, we're gonna fight the monster of the week, and then we're gonna have some quippy dialogue and go on a cool adventure and see some cool crazy stuff and maybe your Digimon will transform to a new form, and he'll do this cool special attack at the end of the episode and save the day. But then later on, you're just like, oh wow, you can't defeat all your problems with a laser beam. You got. Unfortunately, we need to reach some sort of emotional stability here with what's happening, and yeah, it gets pretty rough, and that's one of the reasons that I think that Digimon is well, at least certain seasons of it, they change it up as time goes on, but at least like the first few seasons of Digimon were just rock solid entertainment.
Yeah,
and very impressed by it.
I kind of like how I mentioned before. I didn't really get to watch like certain shows kind of growing up. There's a little bit of like, you know, that show's not good for you, you know, type of thing.
Yeah, I think we all had that.
Yeah, that kind of came with like I had this one neighbor when I was younger, and I've told you this story before, but I had this one neighbor when I was younger who really liked Dragon Ball, and he was just like an absolute shithead of a kid. Like, just he was terrible. And my understanding is that my parents seen that and they were like, well, this is all he talks about, this is the type of behavior he exhibits, like, you're not going to watch these shows, you know. So I never watched like Dragon Ball growing up. Like, I've started watching it now, but and then like Pokemon, I was told like it's brainwashing you. Well, now that I'm an adult, like, I understand what my parents meant when it was like they're brainwashing you, because it's literally gotta catch them all, and then they start selling the merch and the cards and all this other stuff, and it's like, you know, they're trying to get you to buy, and so I understand where my parents were coming from. I'm sure it was like, we don't want you watching this because that's all you're going to ask for, you know. That might be true, that might not be true, but a
lot of it was also, we were coming out of the 80s where there was a lot of like cartoons that were specifically designed to sell toys, and I think The Secret was more or less out by the time like the 90s were around, that it's like, oh, these shows exist just to target kids with commercials for toys.
Yeah, so one of the big things too is my cousin liked Pokemon cards and liked Yu-Gi-Oh cards and stuff like that. So once I kind of started hanging out with my cousin more, I was like, man, I'm gonna start watching Yu-Gi-Oh. Like, I'm gonna get the cards and everything, and we're gonna battle. And I'm sure we didn't play it correctly, but you know, whatever. But I loved like shows like that. So on one of the episodes, I did say like one of the first animes that kind of got me into anime was like Rosario Vampire. But I guess if I'm completely honest, it was shows like Yu-Gi-Oh or like Code Lyoko. I don't know if you ever watched that.
I did, actually.
Yeah, that was an interesting show, and one of my buddies actually really liked that show. And it's weird because he's the one that also watched like Jersey Shore type shit all the time, you know. But like one of his other favorite shows is like Rocket Power, you know, which isn't like an anime, it was a cartoon. But you know, I remember him really liking like Code Lyoko. So I don't know, like those. I don't know if you'd really call them anime. Like Yu-Gi-Oh, probably that's more anime. Code Lyoko, I'd say, is kind of like a on the fence. And like Pokemon is kind of like more so, yes, but it's also like, I don't know, the way that America kind of did it was like a little weird, I guess, with it. Like, it was more of a cartoon than it was like an quote unquote anime.
A lot of it had to be dubbed over, and then they would change certain bits of dialogue and stuff like that. Like, and it's not just like anime that came later. Like, a lot of stuff when it was imported, they did change it. Like, studio execs would say, hey, we have to change this because we can't broadcast this because of different rules or different standards. Because I mean, they had a good bit of fear. Like, there were days pre-Dragon Ball where they tried to import different anime to the US, and it just didn't work at all. Like, nobody liked it because certain jokes or certain bits of dialogue just didn't convey well with American audiences. So that, like, the projects were a total flop, and the studios would just waste all this money. And it was like, is there any money in this Japanese crap, or can we just not sell it in the US?
Now
Then they did it with Dragon Ball, and they still did it with Dragon Ball too. They changed some bits of dialogue too. Like the famous example is Goku's speech when he's on Planet Namek fighting Frieza.
I haven't watched it.
Okay, well, the fans will know what I'm talking about. But basically, he gives a speech to Frieza after his big power up moment, where he's like, I am the hope of the universe, and it's kind of against a lot of stuff about the character, or it's a little bit out of left field, and that's just because honestly the studio execs were going over it, and they were just like, or the producers, or whoever these guys were, like the guys in charge of the project. I'm not sure what their exact job title was.
Yeah,
but they basically said, look, we can't really make Goku into this selfish character that he is portrayed as. Like, it won't work as well, and also parents might not like it as much, or they might not be as cool with it as they are already. So we should, make him sound more like, and I swear I'm not intentionally trying to crib this from Death Battle, but it's like, we should try to make him more like Superman. Like, make him like a superhero. Like, we'll give him a speech where he sounds like he's just this super heroic character fighting evil, and then parents will be more chill about it.
Well, if you look back at like the beginning of Dragon Ball, like not Dragon Ball Z or anything, just Dragon Ball, like that's kind of how he was as a kid. Like he didn't like bullies, he didn't like people picking on other people. He was a little bit of a shit, but he definitely was like, hey, like you're mean, you're bad, like I'm gonna kick your ass. It was so I understand like how that can progress up to like, let's make him more like, I don't want to say altruistic, but I guess like you said, more superhero-esque,
Yeah, more heroic as opposed to because he is a fighter. That's his thing too. It's like he's a fighter through and through. But it's like, let's play up he's a fighter for justice kind of angle.
Yeah, and I mean, like even when he was a kid, that's kind of how he went about things. Is like if somebody was mean to him or his friends, or was picking on somebody else or whatever, like he was like, you're being mean, you should stop. And if they didn't want to stop and they wanted to continue being like, the villain, he was like, well, I'm gonna kick your ass then,
Joke's on you, I'm the protagonist.
Yeah. So I mean, it kind of, it feels right for his character, because that's just how he was growing up. Now, saying all that, I will say switching up some dialogue can also be kind of hilarious in some situations, and I think we'll start the next one off with that, because I got a really good point for it.
Oh, I think I know where you're going with it too, but I'll leave our listeners in suspense unless they're listening far into the future and they can just click the next video.
Yeah. Alrighty, guys. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz, and check out the merch shop, and we'll see you in the next one.
Give us attention so we can fight the YouTube algorithms. But yeah, have a good one too.
Bye.
Bye.